Canada had always looked west when it came to its fighter jets, relying on allies across the Atlantic and especially on the United States. But during the recent jet replacement program, something different happened. This time, Canada briefly looked north, to Sweden. Behind closed doors, the Saab Gripen E wasn't just an outsider candidate. It became the jet that made pilots pause, the aircraft that challenged long-held assumptions, and the contender that some quietly believed should have won. What happened during those tests wasn't broadcast. It didn't make the official report. But pilots revealed it later, discreetly, with a tone that said more than any document ever could. They didn't challenge the official decision publicly, but what they witnessed during the evaluation changed how they viewed modern air combat. When Canada began searching for the successor to its aging CF-18s, most analysts predicted a straightforward outcome. The F-35, backed by the United States, loaded with stealth tech, and part of a massive joint program, was believed to be the inevitable choice. Why risk anything else? Why even consider something smaller, lighter, and seemingly less advanced? But during simulations and tactical evaluations, the Gripen E did something unexpected. It didn't try to compete through power. It competed through resilience, simplicity, and speed of adaptability. Pilots who flew it described it not as a superweapon, but as a survivor. And for some, that made it more valuable. Experts initially dismissed it. They mocked it for being lightweight. They scoffed at Sweden's budget jet. Some even joked that the Gripen was the IKEA of fighters, compact, efficient, but not suitable for war. Yet once pilots got into the simulator and saw how the jet responded, the laughter stopped. Gripen wasn't trying to be intimidating. It was trying to be sustainable. While the world focused on billion-dollar aircraft that needed entire ecosystems to function, Gripen was engineered with a different question in mind. What if the runway is gone? What if communications are jammed? What if bombs take out the airbase? Gripen was designed for exactly that scenario. It can take off from a highway, refuel from an ordinary truck, and be ready to launch within minutes. It was engineered to operate even when infrastructure collapses, using minimal resources in worst-case conditions. A Canadian pilot reportedly said, "When everything's working perfectly, the F-35 wins. But when nothing works, and you're alone up there, that's when you want the Gripen." That comment didn't make it into official evaluation notes, but it circulated through the briefing rooms. It lingered in the air. In simulated combat scenarios, Gripen E caught attention for another reason: how quietly it operated on the radar spectrum. Gripen takes a different approach. Instead of hiding through expensive materials, it hides by staying nearly silent electronically. It doesn't emit much. It blends into background clutter. One pilot summed it up with an unsettling line: "The F-35 hides through stealth. The Gripen hides through silence." During one evaluation, Gripen reportedly achieved radar lock before the F-35 even registered its presence. It didn't overpower the F-35. It outmaneuvered it through clever design and smarter use of signals. Cold weather evaluations also surprised the test crews. In Arctic simulations, Gripen started operating with minimal ground support in harsh low-temperature conditions. The F-35 required specialized hangars, thermal conditioning, and complex diagnostic systems. Gripen simply required fuel and clearance. One Swedish engineer once described their development philosophy like this: "Others build fighters for when war begins. We build them for after war destroys everything." For a country like Sweden, which expects its strategic bases to be struck quickly in a full-scale conflict, designing for survival wasn't optional. It was essential. The pilots also praised Gripen's tactical display and onboard systems. Instead of drowning pilots in excessive data, the Gripen E dashboard filtered information aggressively, giving pilots only what they needed the moment they needed it. The mentality was clear: let the aircraft think ahead so the pilot can focus on the fight. "The F-35 tells you everything," one pilot commented. "The Gripen only tells you what matters." That level of clarity under combat pressure isn't just an engineering achievement, it's a psychological advantage. Another key observation was the turnaround time. Gripen could be serviced in minutes, literally minutes, by a small team using basic tools. The F-35 requires highly trained technicians using specialized equipment in climate-controlled facilities. Gripen was designed to be maintained by conscript-level crews. One comparison stuck with decision-makers. If cyber warfare hits and centralized logistics collapse, Gripen could still launch sorties rapidly. The F-35, if disconnected from secure networks, could struggle just to reboot. That statement sounded like sarcasm at first. Then people realized it wasn't a joke. So why didn't Canada choose Gripen then? The answer lies not in performance, but in geopolitics and long-term commitments. First, the alliance factor. Canada is deeply tied to NATO and US defense structures. Choosing Gripen would have meant stepping outside the alignment path of major allied air forces. Second, infrastructure. Canada already planned for long-term integration with the F-35 systems. Switching would require years of reconfiguration. Third, political optics. Rejecting America's flagship fighter program would send the wrong signal. Not militarily, but diplomatically. In military selection, the smartest jet doesn't always win. The jet that aligns with the alliance often does. After the official announcement in favor of the F-35, a rumored exchange took place between a Saab engineer and a member of the Canadian delegation. The engineer simply said, "You picked the aircraft that matches your strategy, not the one that unsettled you most." The Canadian official reportedly didn't argue. He just nodded silently. Even after the decision, Gripen's reputation grew. Brazil signed deals to operate it. Other smaller air forces began re-evaluating their approach. Analysts started asking whether future wars will be won, not by the aircraft with the most technology, but by the one that stays operational when everything else fails. Even within Canadian aviation circles, some pilots admit off record, "If we had to fight deep after infrastructure collapse, Gripen is the jet we'd pray to have." The controversy was never that Gripen was inferior. The controversy was that in terms of raw adaptability, it sometimes appeared superior. Not stronger, but smarter. Not louder, but more aware. It was built not to dominate skies through intimidation, but to remain airborne when domination no longer matters. The decision was made. The F-35 won the contracts and headlines, but the Gripen won the respect of professionals who flew it. It changed how those pilots thought about war, about what aircraft should be able to do when supply lines fail, when satellite links drop, and when there's no guaranteed backup. And one day, if warfare shifts the way many believe it will, when independence becomes more crucial than integration, some might look back at this rejection and see it not as a loss for Gripen, but as a warning for everyone else. Because sometimes the strongest doesn't win the contract. Sometimes the smartest simply waits to be understood. In a sky filled with powerful giants, it was the smallest jet that made pilots hesitate and realize that power means nothing if you can't keep flying. Canada didn't choose the Gripen, but those who flew it never forgot what it did, and in the silent battles of the future, it might be the quietest aircraft that ends up being the loudest reminder that survival, not strength, wins the final fight.